This is the Plant Yourself podcast. I'm Howard Jacobson of PlantYourself.com and the Big Change Program with Josh Lajani. This podcast is part of my mission to help you live a loving and limitless life. So we got a couple things to talk about before we get to today's show. First is, if you find yourself self-sabotaging your healthy eating, your exercise, your meditation, your whatever habits, you get started and then almost immediately you kind of fall off the wagon, I have a report for you. It's the Stop Self-Sabotage report, which is harder to say than you might think. And you can get it for free at plantyourself.com/sabotage. Second thing is, I got an email from a guy who's going to be appearing on the podcast probably in February or March of next year. His name is Jamie Friesen. He is a dynamo. He's a young guy, but very entrepreneurial. And he emailed me to see if I wanted to try a bunch of natural vegan products like shampoo and stuff like that. And if you've seen a picture of me, you know that I'm not really a shampoo or conditioner user, but I am enjoying the deodorant, the toothpaste, the body wash, and the bar soap. Now, if you're starting to think that that's how cheap I am, that you can get a mention on the podcast just by sending me some grooming products, there's a lot more. They have a really cool vision for the company, including a large regenerative farm where they produce all the material. They're Canadian, which immediately makes me love them. And they have their head of PR is Crowley the pig, who has a couple of legs that don't work. And somebody made for him a kind of a walking crate that allows him to get around. And so heart's in the right place. And they have a Kickstarter campaign that they are looking to raise some funds to get product out the door so that they can make a splash. So if you're interested, check out the show notes for today's episode, which is plantyourself.com/244. You can also just go directly to naturalveganproducts.com. You can check out their stuff. You can go to the Kickstarter there. There's going to be, by the time you hear this, there'll be a week left. They've already tripled their goal for the campaign, and if you contribute to it, you can get some nice vegan, all-natural personal care products. There's actually a bunch of videos of these guys actually eating and drinking their stuff, which probably I wouldn't recommend, but they do put their money where their mouth is. So naturalveganproducts.com, you can check out their Kickstarter, and let me know what you think. I'm not affiliated with these guys financially in any way. They were just charming and go-getters, and I like their vision and I like their mission. So let's see what we can do to help them out. Okay, so now let's talk about today's episode with one of the huge stars of the plant-based movement in medicine, Dr. Scott Stoll. So the first thing to know about Scott is that he was a walk-on to the U.S. bobsled team and made it to the 1994 Winter Olympics. And he did it without ever having been on a bobsled before. So that really speaks to Scott's belief in you can do anything you set your mind to. And that's a good thing because Scott has made it his life mission to transform the healthcare industry into one that practices actual healthcare rather than just disease management and mitigation and all the stuff that we know about. He is a co-founder of the Plantrician Project, which is doing a tremendous amount around medical education, about showing doctors a different way of doing things, and showing doctors who've already embraced that different way of doing things how they can actually make a living while doing those new, different, better things. The other thing that surprised me about Scott when we started talking is sort of how gentle and kind and present and loving he is. I guess when I read a resume and I see how sort of hard driving and accomplished someone is and how much they've done and pushed back against the powers that be, I kind of expect them to be kind of, type A, alpha, gruff, let's get this done. And Scott was just the opposite, which is a really good lesson and reminder for me, because I like to be sort of present and loving and flowing, and realizing that that's not something that I need to change if I want to change the world. So I'll see you at the other end, and I predict that this conversation will make you extremely positive and hopeful about the kind of changes that are coming down the pike when we've got someone like Scott on our team. So without further ado, Dr. Scott Stoll, welcome to the Plant Yourself podcast.
Hi, Howard. It is such an honor to be with you and with this amazing audience, and I really am honored to be a part of this Plant Pure podcast. I love the work that you're all doing and the influence that you have brought upon this country, and so it's a great honor to spend the today with you. Thank you so much.
Well, right back at you. So before we get into all of the amazing things you're doing and the projects, and you're kind of like the plant-based movements, all-star project coordinator, creator, and manager. Like there's so many things you're doing that have grown so much bigger than you. Before we get to that, I'd love to hear kind of your story. I know you're a former athlete, and how did you get to be plant-based? How did you get to medicine? All that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's I always love, like you, I'm sure do too, asking people that question in the plant-based world because there's so many interesting stories of how people find their way into plant-based nutrition, and especially as healthcare practitioners changing their practices, and they're always inspiring. So I appreciate that opportunity. Yeah, just a quick background. I grew up in a family that appreciated health. And I think back then did the best they could to try and make things healthy. I remember my dad making transitions out of chocolate cake, starting to use carob and, other alternative sweeteners. And we went along with it. The chocolate cake didn't taste quite as good, but it was still my dad's vision to try and make things healthier. And he did a lot of baking. My mom cooked. And, so I grew up always, I think, with kind of a basic appreciation and value for healthy cooking, although we still were unhealthy looking back in it retrospectively, being influenced by the Western culture and still going to McDonald's and eating ice cream and drinking lots of milk and suffering some of the consequences, even as a young man, having a lot of acne from that milk and not understanding that and taking antibiotics to try and get rid of it. So, I faced some of those consequences, even in my youth, not knowing what the problem was and seeking solutions from healthcare that really didn't solve the problem. It was a temporary solution and also brought some harm into my life, probably from injuring my microbiome.
Mm.
I was an athlete and loved athletics. I ran track through college, and I happened to be watching the 1992 Olympics with a friend of mine. And I said to my friend Doug, I said, Doug, I've always loved bobsledding, and it's something I've always wanted to do since I was a little boy. I used to watch bobsledding on television, and I would go outside with my little sled and imagine that I was bobsledding in Switzerland at the World Championships. And so my friend Doug is one of those wonderful can-do people. And he said, well, let's just call and find out how you try out for the bobsled team. So the next day, he's on the phone and he calls the Olympic Training Center and said, how does somebody try out for the bobsled team? And so they invited us down to the Olympic Training Center, and we took a sprinting and jumping test down there and scored well enough that they invited us to Lake Placid, New York in the summer for the National Push Championships. And they fly in maybe 70 people from around the country, plus the last 92 Olympic team. And they have a little bobsled on rails. And you push this bobsled for time and in push-offs during the course of a week. And so I went and pushed, and before I knew it, I was one of the top 9, and I'd made the World Cup team, never having seen a bobsled nor been in a bobsled. And I went on this wonderful adventure before medical school of traveling around the world and bobsledding, and eventually made it to the 1994 Olympic team. And so I had this incredible moment of walking into the opening ceremonies and remembering that just 2 years before, I was in my basement in Fort Collins, Colorado, watching the 1992 Olympic opening ceremonies. And it was such a great blessing and amazing opportunity in my life. And I still work as a physician with the bobsled team and have worked with them in many different capacities as a doctor, and also tried to influence their nutrition. And just a quick side note, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it seems like if that's like sort of an origin story, it seems like it kind of ruins you for pessimism,
Yeah, that's right. It's right. It really is. And it teaches you so many wonderful things in life that it's okay to pursue your dreams. It's okay to try out. It's okay to, ask those important questions like, why can't I? And to pursue it because you never know. Had my friend not taken the initiative to say, well, why can't we try out? Maybe we'll make the team. I would never have had that amazing experience. So I learned so much from my friend Doug, and I think it's just one of those poignant reminders in life to say, well, why can't I? And actually to go for it.
See, I've always wondered about that when I watch bobsled or luge, because, it doesn't look like they're doing anything. And I know that's not true. But when you tell a story like that, yeah. I'm like, maybe it's not that hard. Maybe you just have some sort of innate skill, or there's not like, what did you tell yourself when you got there and being a complete novice, being in the top 9? Like, how did you explain that to yourself?
Yeah, looking back on it, it was, I remember watching one of the little vignettes of a bobsledder from Colorado. And I saw Joe Sawyer, and I watched him and I said, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And I think that's like one of those important lessons to learn too, that, if you start to believe you can do it, you're probably capable of a lot more than you realize. So I went into the bobsled push championships, believing that I could probably do it because I had seen somebody else and realized that I had the same skill set that he did. So the belief system, I believe, really gave me an advantage when I walked in to be confident rather than fearful at the push trials. And, the skill sets of most bobsledders are, they're sprinters from track and field, or they're, wide receivers or running backs from football. And so there were people there from the National Football League. There were, NCAA track and field championships, amazing people. I wasn't either of those things, but I had the belief that, I have the same skill set, so I can do it. And I think that that's what helped propel me through and to finish really well, is that I did have skills, but I also had strong belief that it was possible.
Mm-hmm. And I know, I'm getting way ahead of myself, but I can just imagine how that mindset got woven into the immersions that you take people through, right? Where the idea of, I can do this. I can get healthy. I can lose weight. I can take control of my eating, where that's kind of the big issue as opposed to the nuts and bolts details of what to eat.
Yeah, you're right. And yeah, we'll jump ahead because you're absolutely right. It all weaves together. One of the things that we start our immersions with each time that we do one is taking people back to who they are and why they're there. Because it's very easy to get lost in the how and the what of making a lifestyle transition. What do we need to eat and how do we make it work? But I've often found that if you don't understand really who you are and why you're going to do this, that eventually the what and how become burdensome, and you lose the vision and the passion behind it, and you slip back into the those old patterns and behaviors and habits that are comfortable, or helping to pacify some pain in life. So we always start helping people to know who they are, because it's that core identity that is really important. And that's what I kind of understood when I was bobsledding. I understood, who I was, and that this was a lifelong passion, a lifelong dream, and that I had skills and abilities that would make me successful and that I could make the team. And my why for that was this, very clear vision in my mind of myself walking into the opening ceremonies and competing at the Olympics. And it was a very clear vision that brought up emotion and passion within me. And that's what we try to do at the immersions. We try to help people understand a new why for life, because we've often found that people that have gone through many rounds of diets and suffered a lot of defeat, and having the world tell them that they're failures, and facing sickness and illness and some of the challenges of living in Western culture, have lost vision and dreams and a passionate why for their lives. So we really help them, to work through that in the beginning, to understand that, that the healthy lifestyle choices that they're going to make are going to be fuel for them to help achieve their why and their purpose and their passion and their dreams. And in that way, they kind of get pulled through a lifestyle transition rather than pushing against the resistance of culture and family and friends and some of the challenges of making a lifestyle transformation.
Gotcha. That's beautiful. So, were you similarly passionate as a young person about going into medicine? When did that bug bite?
Yeah, when I look back at it, as one of my favorite books when I was in grade school, and I must have read it, 15 or 20 times, was this little book called The Athlete's Body. And it went through all the physiology and some of the anatomy of an athlete's body, and I read it until I memorized it. And I can remember dissecting fish that I caught, and I was always interested in that aspect. But I think moving from high school into college, I was a little fearful of the workload of going into medicine. So I had started out with a vision of, getting a degree in nutritional science and biochemistry. And as I was going through my second and third year of college and thinking about what I really wanted to do and what I was passionate about, I found that my passions really led me back toward medicine. And then I realized that I wouldn't be happy or satisfied if I wasn't in medicine. Both the science aspect was so intellectually stimulating, and then the humanity aspect of it and caring for people and helping transform people's lives was such a natural fit with who I was that the workload didn't seem like it was going to be burdensome, but actually joyful in the process. And so about my third year of undergraduate, I decided to pursue medicine and, tightened up my belt and went forward with pre-med and the MCATs and pursued medicine, and I haven't regretted it to this day and can't imagine doing something different with my life.
Mm. So if you love the science and seeking truth and exploration, and sounds like you really loved med school, how did plant-based stuff get interjected in there? Because I know there's a real tension point for a lot of people between the medical establishment and nutrition. And I know your interest in the Plantrician Project it's largely about we have to bridge that gap. How did that gap appear to you when it first occurred?
Yeah, I was practicing medicine after my residency, just as I had been taught, seeing patients, asking them the right questions, trying to find a diagnosis, writing prescriptions, doing procedures. And I had heard my patients continually tell me the same thing, that they were falling apart. With a laugh and a smile, they would say, "Oh, Dr. Stoll, I'm falling apart." I would go to a family get-together, and I would hear family members talking about falling apart. I'd hear my parents, friends saying they were falling apart. I just thought it was a natural consequence of aging, that's what happened, and that's why medicine was in place, was to help people mitigate some of the problems and falling apart and use procedures and medications to help minimize pain and the symptoms. But then there was a day in my practice, a woman was sitting on my exam table, and she said, "Dr. Stoll, can't you help me? I'm falling apart." And I just asked the right question. I said to her, everybody tells me that they're falling apart. What does falling apart really mean to you? And like so many physicians, I had already anticipated her answer because I was looking at her past medical history, her medication list, her surgical history list, her family history. And she started in a place that I didn't expect. She said, "My marriage is falling apart because my husband is exhausted. He's been caring for me for years, and we don't have a real relationship anymore. I haven't been able to travel to see my grandchildren in 3 years because I can't leave the city, and my health is so inconsistent. I can't make the trip. I can't attend church anymore. We're facing financial bankruptcy because of the cost of my health care. I'm depressed, and my friends have stopped coming around, and I feel lonely." And then she said, with tears running down her face, "Can you help me?" And it was one of those moments in life when you feel completely helpless. As a doctor, we're trained to help, have answers, to be the solution, to have something, ready on the tip of our pen to solve a problem. And I sat there and I had absolutely nothing. I thought back through my medical education. I thought back through my my education and residency, and nobody had prepared me to answer that question and to help somebody put their life back together again. I could write a prescription, I could order tests, I could make a diagnosis, but I didn't know how to help this person. And I soon realized that if she was asking that question, that all these other people that had similarly told me that they were facing this falling apart problem were likely facing many of the same challenges, that I needed to try and find a solution. My passion was to help people transform their lives and get the most out of their lives and to fulfill their calling. And I didn't know how to do that. So it sent me on a research project where I started reading, first diet books. I thought certainly one of these doctors who's written a diet book had an answer to this problem. And I soon realized that from Atkins to Zone, they all were talking about weight loss. None of them were talking about solving disease or reversing disease and helping put people's lives back together again.
So can I interrupt you for a second there? Because what strikes me is the real miracles of this story are a couplefold. One is that you were willing to ask that question instead of knowing what people meant by falling apart. But the second was that you felt like this was your responsibility. I could easily imagine a doctor listening to that and thinking, it was as if this woman is saying, well, my pipes are bursting, my toilet's blocked. And you say, oh, well, you don't need a doctor, you need a plumber. Like you could easily have punted, right? And said, well, you need a therapist, you need a financial planner, you need a book on etiquette. Like what made you think, okay, this is in my bailiwick?
Yeah, it's a great question. And when I looked at one of the root causes of her problems, and that's something that I've always been interested in, is like finding the root cause. Because if you can solve the root cause, many of the symptoms of the problems go away. And when I looked at her life, one of the primary root causes for many of the manifestations of her falling apart was the disease in her life. She was sick. She had, hypertension, she had heart disease, she had had a diagnosis of cancer, she had, multiple medications and side effects. And I saw that, the illnesses in her life were causing this incredible, socioeconomic relational challenge. And that if I could go dig down and pull out that root and figure out how to solve the problem of the illness in her life, that many of those socioeconomic, relational, interpersonal problems would resolve. And so I felt like that's why it was my responsibility, because it was right there in the heart of medicine.
Gotcha. And roughly what year was this?
So that was almost 15 years ago now.
It's about 2002, 2003.
That's about right. Yeah.
All right. So you decide you went looking at nutritionists.
I did.
Right, or diet doctors, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good diet doctors. That's good. Yes, that's exactly right.
Uh-huh. Yeah, what made you look there? What made you think, diet and nutrition as opposed to, there was lots of other stuff around at that point. There was, Larry Dossey and, healing prayer and lots of new age stuff. What made you gravitate towards food?
Yeah, I think some of it goes back to those parts of our history. Looking back, growing up in a family where I realized that food was important, and we'd had conversations about sugar growing up. My nutritional education in undergraduate, although it was insufficient and incomplete, it still was a foundation to recognize that food has some power and influence in our lives. And, I'd seen that at the most basic level, that when somebody is obese or overweight, that obesity and overweight condition is related to a host of other medical conditions. And so I guess it was those several components that pointed me back in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So after looking at Atkins and Barry Sears, you obviously didn't give up.
That's right. And I actually, one of the other things that was popular at that time was, and still is today, was age management medicine. And I had seen, pictures of that gentleman. He's on the In-Flight magazine still today. He's about mid-70s and has the body of a 25-year-old. And I thought, well, maybe that, is part of the solution. So I got certified in age management medicine and realized that was not a solution for the general population. It was expensive. There were side effects associated with it. And it didn't lead to a reversal of disease. So I finally went back and just started reading articles online, around nutrition. And I started to see the common thread that the more whole plant foods that people ate, the healthier they became. And in that process, I came across, the China study. Like so many of us were influenced by T. Collins' amazing work. I came across Eat to Live by Joel Fuhrman, and I went to spend some time with Joel Fuhrman, and I saw his patients were getting healthier as they got older. And it was one of those aha moments when you realize that maybe my education in medical school and residency was incomplete, and there's much more to learn to being a physician, to really helping people to transform their lives and break free the bondage of disease.
So how did you begin to incorporate these insights into your own practice?
What we did first, I have to always give my wife credit. She was probably, 8 to 10 years ahead of us. When I was in medical school, she had been reading some books by Gary Knoll, and she had said to me, I think we really need to transition over to vegetarian, vegan. And, coming out of the Olympics and thinking I needed milk and meat to be strong, I said, but I'm going to lose all my muscle. I'm not going to be strong and healthy if I transition over to vegetables. So she was so kind and said, okay, and continued to make me meat and patiently waited for me to come along and would leave books, around the house, and I would read them. But, if I had learned to listen to my wife back then, I would have been much further ahead. But she was really kind of the initiator in our family. But, first we initiated this change in our own family. We changed what we ate. We changed what our children ate. We learned how to make the food. And shortly thereafter, I would take out my prescription pad and I would use my prescription pad to write recipes for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, for smoothies. And I saw amazing transformations in the life of my patients in a very short period of time, and realized that this is one of the secrets of lasting health, is the food we eat. And it was far more powerful than I ever imagined in transforming a life.
Wow. So that really contradicts the narrative that I've heard from so many doctors that, well, my patients just want a pill. They don't want to take responsibility. They won't do it. They won't be compliant. Right? You found that there was at least a percentage of them that were hungry for this.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I learned as a physician that, I had more influence over my patients' decisions than I recognized. And I also realized that as a physician, I would often influence them negatively by what I spoke over them. One of the common things that I heard in training and heard many partners say, would say occasionally, and I feel bad about that now, is that I would say to them, well, this is a really bad case of whatever you have. It's not reversible. You're stuck with it for life. And, there's no other option but to take the medication. And what that does for the patient, it steals away any hope of anything different in the future. And if they hear something like that, and then, I follow up with, well, maybe changing your diet will help. If there is no hope, they're not likely to be inclined to make a lifestyle transition and to undergo some of the challenges that, inevitably come when we change what we eat and how we live. And I realized that, a hopeless person is not likely to be motivated. And the power of my words and my own belief systems could inspire hope and belief in a patient that even came in hopeless. And I started to see that when I changed the way that I spoke to my patients and I started to speak with belief and conviction and hope, people that I didn't even expect to make a lifestyle transition would willingly take it on. And I soon realized that, that short 10-minute or 15-minute conversation in a physician's office can be radically transformational, because patients put a tremendous amount of hope and credibility on what their doctor tells them. And so I think you're exactly right when you point that out. It is so important for us to understand, how we speak to patients and what we say that enables them to make a transition in their life.
Yeah, it sounds like it's much more than the words you say, because, there's other doctors who could say those words, but if they didn't have the energetic conviction behind those words, they wouldn't get their same results, even if they were reading this, a script that you wrote for them, right? It was your own experience and your own willingness to do the research that and your own spending time with Dr. Furman and seeing the outcomes firsthand that gave you the confidence that allowed you to speak the words.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Howard. It is the people, we can say the words, but the verbal communication is really only 10% of communication. 90% is what we believe, what we feel, the hope, the nonverbal communication of our body. All of those things convey the message in a very profound way to patients. And I think that what had happened to me is that I came to a place where I absolutely believed that this was a solution for people that could give them their lives back. I believed that I could help them walk that out and transform their lives, and believe that it was a solution. And so I think that they heard the words, but they experienced the love and the hope that I had towards them, and the willingness that I had to come alongside of them and make that change.
So as you transformed your practice to writing scripts for smoothies and stuff, what did you discover that they needed to be able to transition and to maintain it?
Yeah, like I said earlier, they really, people needed hope, they needed inspiration, they needed vision, and then they also needed some real practical assistance. They needed accountability, and they needed support and community. And all of those elements lead to a lasting, sustainable lifestyle change. I think one of the mistakes that I may have made early was believing that information and knowledge was enough. And, just giving information and giving knowledge without providing, some kind of a community and support, some level of accountability, some assistance in helping them to see the vision, and also being supportive through the ups and downs. And I had seen that so many people through like a dietary system had an idea of success and failure around making a dietary change. And if they failed, they were quick to throw out the diet because they said it just didn't work for them. So I actually had to learn how to teach them that this is not a system of success or failure. And in fact, in the process of making a change or in the process of pursuing something great, whether it was, for me going back to the Olympics or anything, there's going to be periods of time when you're not successful, when you don't do things correctly, and it's okay because it's a part of the process. And to be okay and accept that, you may have some days when you fail, you may have some days when you eat a meal that's not very healthy, and it's okay because it's really about the next bite, it's about the next meal and continuing forward toward that greater vision. And I think that, those are the elements that I learned through the years that really help to equip people to make a sustainable lifestyle change.
So were you able to create community among your patients?
Yeah, I really worked to do that, through not only online opportunities, but just even locally. And one of the things that I have found through the years that really helps to support sustainable change is a community dinner. When people can join together on a regular basis and share a potluck dinner together to talk, to encourage one another, and it's a level of accountability, just showing up, with other people that are making a lifestyle change, to have a place to ask questions, a safe place to go. that can help to fuel change in a community. And in the absence of community, it can be very difficult because at our current place in our culture, the culture has a tremendous influence anywhere we go. And if you don't have that place to come back to where you can find support and encouragement, it can be much more difficult to make a go of it on your own.
It was like the community dinner is a kind of booster shot against the pathogens of culture.
That's a good way to put it, Howard. That's right. I've actually even seen some scientific articles that describe the Western lifestyle and diet in terms of like a viral vector as it has gone out across the world and infected all the nations of the earth. So I think that's right. The community dinner is a booster shot.
So what was next? I know you're involved in some very large national, international projects. How did you grow from having your own private practice locally to getting involved in some of these bigger things?
Yeah, as I was practicing, I recognized there was a need to maybe try and teach, more people some of the basic principles and things we were learning. So my wife and I decided that we were going to do a one-day health immersion at DeSales University here in the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania. And so we rented a conference room. We worked with the kitchen over at DeSales to produce a healthy lunch. We got a bunch of vendors to come, and we had about 150 people that came to our little one-day health immersion. And it was like putting a flag in the ground for my wife and I and saying, we're going to move forward. We're going to support people. We're going to try and change our community. And this is the flag that we're planting that says we're here and we're going to make a change. And out of that, one-day event, I met some people that were doing health immersions. I invited Joel Furman to come speak, and he eventually asked me to join the Whole Foods Scientific Advisory Board, which I participated in for a number of years. And out of that, I was asked to host one of their week-long health immersions, working with the most unhealthy employees at Whole Foods. And out of doing immersions for a period of time and seeing the amazing transformations that happen in a week, but also recognizing how difficult it is for people to go back home and work with their doctors, I had said one evening at dinner time to my friend Tom Dunham, who's a partner in the health immersions, I said, we really need to start a conference to help educate physicians so that, all these people that are coming to health immersions will have a doctor that will support them in their lifestyle change. And Tom's another can-do person like my friend Doug King. I've been very blessed with some of those people in my life. And Tom said, all right, well, let's do it. And we had no idea what we're getting ourselves into. And thankfully, we were rescued along the way by a good friend that's now a partner, Susan Benegas, who understood marketing and helped us market the conference. And we held our first conference in Naples after the health immersion, and we had about 180 people that came. And it was really an amazing opportunity to connect with healthcare practitioners from around the world and begin creating a place for them to learn and to connect to plant-based nutrition. And we just hosted our last conference in September of this year, and we had 1,000 healthcare practitioners from 25 countries, which is so exciting to us because we see that, each of those healthcare practitioners will touch hundreds to thousands of lives, and really provide opportunities to change and transform, many, many families around the world.
And that's the Plantrician Project, right?
Yeah, the not-for-profit is called the Plantrician Project, and our conference is called the International Plant-Based Nutrition Healthcare Conference, pbnhc.com, plant-based-nutrition-healthcare.com. And it's a wonderful conference with lots of like-minded people and amazing lectures and great food. Of course, we work with the hotels to provide breakfast, lunch, and dinner and amazing food. And one of our visions for that is not just to come and learn from speakers, but that at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, people from around the world can sit around the table, enjoy a great meal, and find that community support, collaboration, vision casting that's really important for a movement to move forward.
So when you first invited the people and you had 180 people come, what did you think the needs were of the physicians? Did you think they needed education? They needed convincing? They needed, financial practice models. What did you hear from them, and what did you assume?
Yes, early on, I believed that there needed to be a conference that was unbiasedly plant-based. That we say, we believe that plant-based nutrition should be a foundational cornerstone of a healthcare practice, and that in that bias and that belief, we're going to create a conference with lectures, scientific information that helps to show the scientific underpinnings of whole food plant-based diet all the way down to the molecular level, so that even a physician that is not quite certain about the benefits of this would be interested to come and learn about the physiology and the science and the biochemistry of nutrition and reversing disease. We also believed that whole food plant-based nutrition is the best way to reverse disease. And so our intention was to invite speakers and support research to demonstrate that whole food plant-based nutrition can reverse disease. Third, we recognized that there was a real need for community within the whole food plant-based healthcare movement, that doctors and nurses and PAs and nurse practitioners and health coaches needed an opportunity to come together, to have conversations, to strategize, to collaborate, to find encouragement, and that a conference provides that opportunity once a year. Again, it's like a booster shot. It's gives you a shot of energy and vision for the year. Later, we recognized as we went into the future conferences, the real need for the application aspect of whole food plant-based nutrition in a healthcare practice, and that it's really a disruptive information technology, because it goes against many of the the paradigms of a traditional healthcare practice. It certainly is difficult to find reimbursement for it. And so physicians and healthcare practitioners are always asking that question, well, how can I make this work in my practice, and how can I make an income? And so we've really worked to, modify our content at the conferences to include, real practical application, working with, administrators, making this financially feasible and solvent in a practice, and how to work even through challenging cases and challenging diseases. So, we're trying to, I think it's an ever evolving process.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And what have you found in terms of people being able to innovate? Because it sounds like right now it's sort of a wild west of successful practice models. People kind of, I've heard things about people sort of, figuring out how to play the insurance codes to turn dinners into things you can bill for, or concierge models or community models. Like how much progress have we made as a community in terms of both sort of fiddling around the edges to just kind of eke out a living, and also to innovate like game changer models for patients and communities?
Yeah, I think your analogy is absolutely right. It is a little bit like the wild, wild west right now. I think we're still working to figure those things out. I think we know more now than we did 5 years ago. And I think there are some reimbursement models using codes that work. And one of those that we have seen work very effectively, not only for billing and reimbursement, but really for patient care, are the group models. Those are codes that are recognized by Medicare, that will take a group of patients that are facing a similar disease like diabetes, put them into a group and allow them to undergo a group visit that may include a physician visit, a nurse visit, a nutritionist, dietitian, a health coach, all working, both individually and a group to guide that group of people toward disease remission and healing. And that little group pulls together, they develop relationships, support and encouragement, and they kind of go through the process together. And so it seems to be a really effective and efficient way to at least work within the system currently. I know that there's always a tendency to try and find codes to make things work. And, through the years as a practicing physician, I've seen many of those come and go. Eventually, health insurance companies recognize that, people are trying to use these things maybe not in the way they were designed, and they close those down. So any of those may be short-lived. And then certainly people are looking at concierge and cash-based practices, which, are working, but it's one of the challenges. And I think, for the heart of many of us in plant-based nutrition is that, some people are excluded that don't have the finances to access those things. And so we're trying to, understand ways to reach every aspect of the socioeconomic patient population to bring this message, because it is so important and so transformational. And especially, the lower income populations that really need this information may not be able to access it if it is only a cash-based practice. That's where I think these group codes can be a very efficient way. But there's a lot of work to be done. But the good news is that there's lots of very brilliant physicians that are actively working. We have recently, there's a group that started out of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine that I was asked to be a part of called the Lifestyle Medicine Economic Research Consortium, which is looking at, the economics of plant-based nutrition in healthcare, and then creating some research projects and strategies to try and infiltrate, traditional healthcare with lifestyle medicine and make it financially solvent. So the good news is there's more coming as more and more people are looking at this. And eventually, I think we all recognize that the current healthcare system is not sustainable, and that there has to be a switch to reward physicians and healthcare practitioners for keeping people healthy, and not the current disease-based model, which is rewarding people for volume and procedures. So I'm really hopeful that eventually that will be the case.
Right. As you were talking about, the insurance companies kind of get wise to the fact that you're using their code. It struck me as insane that they're like, hey, you can't help people get well. That's not how we designed this thing.
That's right. It really is insane when you recognize what they might try to do with that. You're right. That's right. Don't stop reversing disease. And another part of it, I had another one of those aha moments this last year. I was visiting the headquarters of a very large, well-known insurance company, talking with some of the upper level C-suite executives, and one of them was very honest, and he said, "Listen, I just have to tell you that our health insurance company is not really interested in reversing diabetes." And I said, "Well, how can that be? Look at the lives that are transformed and the cost savings." He said, "Well, we're a publicly traded company. We're always worried about next quarter earnings. And you have to realize that the way the health insurance company is set up, we make more money when somebody goes from pre-diabetic to diabetic because of some of the pharmaceutical reimbursement." So he said there are accountants and executives at the top that know that if we transition to reversing diabetes, we're going to lose money. Our quarterly earnings will decrease, and we'll face the scrutiny and consequences on Wall Street. So he said, "I understand where you're coming from, but it's just not what we're interested in." And I walked out of that health insurance meeting, out at the front doors of this building that is, granite from floor to ceiling with big banners in the entryway that say, your health is important to us, and pictures of people running and exercising. And I thought, the health insurance industry is not going to be part of the solution anytime soon. So we need to look for other avenues. And one of those other avenues that I believe is important is self-insured companies. I think that is really one of the places where we can have a tremendous influence in changing, the insurance availability for members of a self-insured company.
Right, because they don't have the same conflicts of interest. Their bottom line is the same as yours. And I assume there's models in which, you take a piece of their savings, as opposed to we get paid to do wellness or insurance, regardless of how that affects your bottom line.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that would be a win-win for everyone. You're absolutely right.
So I want to ask you a little bit about the immersions, because that's kind of how I heard about you from your writing partner, Mylan Ross, who for
Yes.
folks who haven't listened to his interview with me or read his book or heard his story anywhere, was morbidly obese, very, very unhappy and sick, and came to one of, I guess, your 7-day immersion and totally turned his life around. I mean, he's a great example, but kind of what did you start seeing in the immersion, that in the 7-day things that that made you hopeful, and how did you decide how to set up the agenda for the week?
Yeah, I was so blessed to be asked by John Mackey to host one of their health immersions. And, it wasn't something new. Nathan Pritikin started doing this back in the 1970s. John McDougall started his 10-day immersions, a decade before. And John Mackey continued that vision. And it was such an amazing opportunity for me to experience how powerful food can change somebody's life in just a week. And one of the things that, we saw during that week is that we have to discontinue and reduce medications almost on a daily basis for people because their body responds so quickly to healthy food. And it's really eye-opening to see that somebody can abuse their body for decades, and that just 1 week of healthy food can minimize many of those effects of, hundreds or thousands of meals that were unhealthy. So it's been really, really fun for us to see that profound effect of food. And I think we've learned through the years as we have transitioned and worked with people in these health immersions. We've been doing them for almost 9 years now, most of the time twice a year, just recently once a year. And, I think what I have seen is that so many people come in and they are sick, they have failed multiple diets through the years. They don't have hope. Their physicians have not encouraged them. They come in very reticent and somewhat resistant to making changes. And I think, they are skeptical that this is actually going to work. So I've learned that early on I have to gain their trust and inspire hope in order for them to make a lasting lifestyle change. I'm just remembering the story of a woman that came one year, and she brought with her a dozen donuts in her suitcase. And she, she was thinking, well, I'm going to this health immersion, but I don't think I can make it through this entire week without eating a donut every day. And she came in and, during the first evening we have dinner, and I try to give them kind of a visionary short talk and encourage them and let them know that we love them and that they can trust us and we're there to take care of them. And she went back to her room and left the donuts on her nightstand, didn't eat them. She came to the lectures the next day, learned some information, had an opportunity to, experience that food can actually be good. She had a really good breakfast and a delicious lunch, and it wasn't as bad as she expected. It wasn't just a bowl of nuts and twigs and green lettuce. And she went back and decided she was going to throw her donuts away. And so she threw them in the garbage can, and she later recounted to us, and this is the power of food, that every time she walked past that garbage can, she was tempted to reach in and grab a donut. But it was only the fear of being caught or having, powdered sugar on her lips that prevented her from doing that. But eventually, when the garbage was taken out and thrown away, she gained freedom from the power of donuts. And at the end of the week, after going through some detox and understanding the power of food addiction, she was free and she was able to make a lasting lifestyle change. But I think in some settings, for people that are really struggling, that week away provides a safe week for them to break some of the food addictions and overcome some of the emotional eating, much like Mylan did during that week that we shared together.
Right. Now, in Mylan's story, the key player is Sean Stevenson, right? Who's a clinical psychologist who has an amazing life story. He was born with brittle bones. He's about 3 feet tall. How did you decide to bring him in to the immersion?
Yes, I think that, early on we recognized that people needed inspiration And they also needed to go through some emotional healing. One of the really amazing things that we have seen with food is that it is so closely tied to our emotions. It is tied to the pain that we have felt physically, the pain that we have felt emotionally. And when you look at sugar, fat, and salt, they work on the same receptors in the brain where Percocet and Vicodin and Valium work, pain medications, anti-anxiety medications. And so people, in those situations will often use food to pacify their pain, but it really ultimately hinders them from making a lifestyle change. And Mylan, in fact, had shared this, that he had lost 100 pounds multiple times on diets, but it was that deep emotional pain that he carried that always caused him to go back into those foods, the processed foods and the sugar-based foods, to treat his emotional pain, and that would, reignite his food addiction and perpetuate this kind of eating cycle that would cause him to regain weight. And so we saw that, Sean had a piece of the puzzle that could really help people overcome some of their emotional burdens. He was, because of his life and his story, he was very skilled at drawing people out and allowing them to feel safe in dealing with some of those emotional burdens. And that's, in fact, what happened when, he challenged Mylan to come and talk about some of those things that Mylan had been dealing with. And Mylan, I think, as he had told the story, found himself standing at the microphone and wasn't quite sure how he got there, and shared the story of his unresolved bitterness, anger, resentment towards his mother, and then guilt that he didn't resolve that before she passed away. And that night, after sharing that and choosing to forgive himself and forgive his mother, that emotional burden was taken off. And he says he released that heavy backpack. And then, as he likes to say, having released that emotional burden allowed him to release now over 300 pounds. And so we found that Sean was a critical aspect in helping Mylan and others overcome those emotional burdens.
That's beautiful. So the other thing I wanted to talk with you about is, before we started recording, you mentioned a really exciting project with the Rodale Institute. All right? Can you share that?
Oh, absolutely. And it's, it kind of grew out of this, I'm always asking myself questions. And I think that's something that my parents taught me. And it's been so valuable to, always ask a question about why you're doing what you're doing. And even around plant-based nutrition, I started to ask myself questions like, this is what I'm eating, but where did it come from? And why is that important? And it led me down these roads of trying to understand how food was grown and the consequences of growing food conventionally versus organically, and asking the questions, is organic food really better for us than conventional food? And I started to develop, out of asking these questions, a vision for creating a health education center on a farm that would demonstrate to people by science the power of the food on their plate, and that the choices that they make to put food on their plate influences and impacts so many different aspects of their life and the future generations. So I happened to be attending a organic farming conference several years ago. It's about 3 years ago now. I took one of my sons, and I thought it would be an important thing for me to try and understand how healthy soil creates healthy plants, and answer the question, does organic food really make a healthier body? And I was there watching the lectures, and one of the lecturers was the executive director of the Rodale Institute, which is about 45 minutes from my house. And the Rodale Institute is the leader in organic farming in the world, and they have done more to advocate for farming organically and demonstrating the science of organic farming, and demonstrating that when somebody farms the land organically with cover crops, that in fact it's equal to, and in many cases better in yield and financial production than conventional farming, on top of a host of other aspects. And they coined the term regenerative agriculture. And so I saw Jeff Moyer giving a lecture. I went back home, and on Monday, I was treating a patient, and I realized that this was his wife. And I had said to her I was at this organic farming conference, and she said, well, that's ironic because next week my husband's coming to see you for his rotator cuff injury. So Jeff came in to see me for his rotator cuff injury. I shared with him my vision about this health education center on a farm, and he got so excited he presented it to the board at Rodale, and they asked me to come present my idea to the board of directors. And it really ignited kind of a new vision for Rodale to start proving what one of the founder of Rodale had written on a blackboard. And he wrote on a blackboard at the initial concept of the Rodale farm. He had written healthy soil equals healthy plant equals healthy person. And then his son later added healthy world. And so our vision for the education center is to prove the science between those equal signs. Healthy soil equals healthy plant, and healthy plant equals healthy person, and how all of those decisions about what we put on our plate and where it comes from influence our planet and the inheritance that we're leaving to our future generations.
Wow. See, I find that so inspiring because I've been living in tension in the nexus of the plant-based world and what you call the regenerative agriculture world, which is also sort of known as permaculture, right? This idea that systems can work together. And, the founders of permaculture, Bill Mollison and Dave Holmgren, basically, made fun of vegetarians and vegetarianism for being, sort of sentimentalist and unrealistic. There's all this stuff about, like if you look at any of the permaculture journals, it's like artisanal cheese making and how chickens can help. It's only been very recently that I've discovered sort of permaculturalists or regenerative agriculturalists who are also veganic, who are seeing, I think, a much bigger picture in terms of inputs and outputs and true sustainability. How did when you started talking to the Rodale folks, how did you help them move to seeing that plants are maybe more of an answer than the kind of animal agriculture that has been promoted for so long?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of similarities to plant-based medicine and, what's often talked about in the plant-based circles of the idea of reductionism and compartmentalization in healthcare. That in healthcare, we have, reduced things down to, single diseases, single receptors, compartmentalize them and try to find solutions to fix the one problem. And I think we've seen the same thing in the agricultural world, even in the concept of regenerative agriculture. They've become so fixated on just regenerating the soil that they, find solutions to fix the soil. And, in that process of looking for solutions to fix the soil, you end up having cows. And so you drink the milk and make cheese and, become kind of mired in that confusion of reductionism. But when you step out and you start looking much more holistically, far beyond just the soil and the power of the choice that we make to put, types of food on our plate and how that looks, not just in our own lives, our own little farm, or our own community and nation, but how it looks globally and how then it looks globally 20 or 30 years from now. And you start, moving those pieces into place and looking at the bigger picture, we can begin to see that regenerative agriculture really only works when it is stimulating a whole food plant-based diet. And in that way, it provides more than enough food for the planet. It provides for the humane treatment of animals. It provides for healthy food for all. It provides for optimal land management and water management. It provides for regeneration of land that has been under animal hoof for decades and has been destroyed. It removes pesticides and toxins from the environment. It allows people to be regenerated. It allows healthcare to be regenerated. So it becomes a comprehensive solution for everything that is touched by the food that is on the plate. And I think when I started to present that at the Rodale Institute, it kind of awakened in them a greater sense that, this is far bigger than we even had anticipated on our organic farm, and it's ignited a greater vision for them. And now, people at Rodale that didn't talk about plant-based diets are talking about plant-based diets and the benefits of plant-based diets and reducing, consumption of animal and animal-based products. And so it's really exciting to see how that's pushing in to that regenerative agriculture. And I know there's going to be points of resistance, but I'm really excited to see, how this greater view of the food on our plate begins to transform some of the conversations in regenerative agriculture.
Right. I guess you're not too far from Ron Weiss, right?
Yes. Yeah. Ron is about maybe an hour away. Good friend of mine, has a similar vision, and we have some wonderful conversations.
Right. I mean, and the other person who has just blown me away, are you familiar with Will Bonsall?
I am not. No, I will have to look that up.
Oh, I'll send you a link to the interview I did with him. I heard of him through Amy Hamlin, who's the director of Healthy School Lunches, the New York advocacy group for healthy food. She had him come to a conference, and I watched the YouTube of that and was utterly blown away. He has a book called Will Bonsall's, I think it's Guide to Radical Self-Reliant Gardening, and it's veganic, and he is an amazing farmer and philosopher of like true regeneration.
Wow, fantastic! Thank you for that. I just pulled him up on my computer here, and I'm going to buy his book. That looks very interesting.
He is a hoot.
That is great. I really enjoy learning from people like that.
Yeah. So what's the vision of the Institute Farm? When will I be able to go there? When can people start learning from it? And what do you think the curriculum will be?
Yeah, our vision is to open in 2019, and the vision is that it will serve probably many purposes. One is it's a point of connection. That sometimes when you build a brick and mortar structure and there's a place where people can meet, we envision hosting conferences, conversations, lectures, get-togethers and parties that will bring people into, a sphere of influence that are not usually in conversation. From the highest levels, the USDA and the FDA, they never have conversations, to physicians and farmers and healthcare executives and local farmers, to media and people of influence, to start having this greater conversation about the influence of the food that we put on our plate, and how we all can work together to bring about change and transformation of the plate and every aspect of that connection that is influenced by those decisions. We also want the center itself to be educational, even down to the septic system. There's a septic system called a wetlands that is regenerative in nature. And so even when people are going to the bathroom, we want them to learn something and to see that there's a better way to regenerate water and recycle water and regenerate land. It's going to be as green as possible. We're going to farm on the roof. We'll have, gardens on the roof. It's going to be, energetically neutral, if not, generating electricity. We're going to try and make every aspect of the center educational. We want people to come and experience both, the kind of high touch aspects of organic farming, but also to not miss the aspect that, organic farming doesn't have to just be, two horses and a plow, but we can use technology to farm organically and provide, more than enough food for people, that they're not mutually exclusive, that high tech and organic farming actually can work together to provide a better solution. So we want a high tech, high touch type center. We'll have screens that will educate people. We'll have biotron walls where you can see the roots growing down into healthy soil and watch the little earthworms wriggle through the soil and teach people about those things. We'll have indoor, outdoor cooking kitchens, allowing children to come and harvest the food and cook a healthy, plant-based pizza and understand that whole process of growing and harvesting and cooking. And we just want it to be a place of inspiration, that people come and they see something different and they think something different than they've ever saw or thought before. And it changes the decisions that they make, and then they become a sphere of influence when they go home.
Wow, I'm so excited by that vision. I'll talk to you offline about how I can get involved because I'm just tingling with
Oh, that's great.
the nexus
We would love that.
of those two loves of mine of regenerative ecological agriculture and healthy plant-based food.
It is really exciting, and I'm sure as you have studied and understand, the future of our planet and the soil is really dependent upon how we grow our food today. And when we transition over to, organic farming with a covering on the soil, we will stop the loss of topsoil. We will regenerate the soil. We will prevent the further loss of nutrients from the soil. It's incredible what happens when we just simply transition and change the way we grow our food and process the food.
Right. One of my favorite permaculture teachers, who's not yet plant-based, but I have hopes, is Jeff Lawton, who says all the
Yes.
world's problems can be solved in a garden.
Yes, isn't it true? It is really true. And it's so interesting how we even regenerate our microbiome while we're in the garden farming. That we inhale those natural soil organisms and it revitalizes the microbiome in our gut. And even that process, produces serotonin and allows us to feel happy while we're in the garden. It's incredible that we're connected to the soil in so many profound ways.
Right. I remember one of the things I heard was that the word human is the root of it is humus.
Yes,
So,
that is exactly right. That's right. And the more that we study, in fact, one of my desires in the next year or two is to write a book with Jeff Moyer, the executive director at Rodale, comparing the human and the humus and agriculture and healthcare and the chemical agricultural world and the pharmaceutical part of healthcare, and then pointing back to the same solution, which is whole food, plant-based nutrition and regenerative agriculture.
right. And and it's funny, there are so many linguistic clues for this, not just in English, but in Hebrew, the word for man is Adam, and the word for soil or land is Adamah. I'm sure
Yes.
most cultures understood this, and we're just sort of shaking off our reductionism and coming back to this obvious insight.
Yes, it's very, very true. And I always encourage people that, wherever you are to grow something, even if it's a small little window garden growing herbs for your food, that act of growing something in the soil changes, who we are, and it connects us to the environment in a very different way. We're grateful for the sunshine. We're grateful for the rain. We experience the joy of seeing something grow. We see the rewards of tending something and harvesting it and using it. It conjures a new level of gratitude in people and a new level of connection to the environment. And I think it makes us more aware and more conscious of the decisions that we make on a daily basis.
That's beautiful. So before I let you go, how can folks follow you, find out more about you, stay in touch, and learn from you?
Yes, thank you, Howard. So, one place where I've tried to kind of localize everything that I'm doing is drscottstoll.com, and you can find out there about the Plantrician Project, which is plantricionproject.org, our healthcare conference, the Plant-Based Nutrition Healthcare Conference, pbnhc.com, our health immersions or changeimmersions.com, and we're doing a 3-day change immersion in Phoenix, February 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Mylan, myself, and my partner Tom Dunham are putting on a nice 3-day kind of get 2018 started right health conference. The books that we've written, The Change, Mylan and I, you can find on Amazon. And Mylan and I just came out with a cookbook, Things That We Enjoy as Families. That's changecookbook.com. And we're always happy to connect with people. I love communicating with people, and it's my desire to just help bring transformation both here and abroad through plant-based nutrition.
Gotcha. So I'll include all those links in the show notes for today's episode. But for folks who are not going to get to the website, Dr. Scott Stoll, is that DR or DOCTOR?
It is DRSCOTTSTOLL.com. and that's the clearinghouse for all those connections. So it's an easy place to go to connect out to all of the different things that we're doing.
Gotcha. Well, Dr. Scott Stoll, I'm so happy to talk to you. I'm so happy to hear your story, your sort of beautiful, loving, caring voice and energy behind it, and to hear about all the amazing things that you've leapt into, like you leapt into bobsledding, and how the world is becoming a better and better place because of it. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Well, Howard, thank you so much. It has been such a blessing, and I've done lots of podcasts, and I just want to compliment you on your really deep probing questions that draw information out, and I think are a real asset to this podcast and bring forth information that really changes and touches people's lives. So I appreciate you, and I thank you for that amazing skill that you have and for sharing that with all of us.
Well, thank you, and be well.
Thank you. You too, and happy Thanksgiving. Thanks, Howard.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Well, thank you, Howard. That was amazing. I really, really enjoyed that.
Oh, good. I mean, I try not to torture my guests too much.
No, you do such a nice job of leading the conversation and drawing information out and not just going to the easy next question. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. You really do an amazing job. You're very talented, and it makes it fun, I think, for your guests.
Well, thanks. And unfortunately, I have a call in 2 minutes, so I can't ask you all the things I wanted to ask you offline. But I'll email you. I would love to be involved in the regenerative project.
Oh, that would be great. It would be great to have you involved. And, I'm just thinking maybe like an advisory board. I mean, there's lots of things that we can do. So we would love to have your knowledge and experience.
Fantastic. All right. So I'll connect with you offline, and we can continue the conversation.
I look forward to it, Howard. Thank you so much. God bless you. Have a great Thanksgiving. Thank you.
You too, Scott. Thanks. And good luck with the bluegrass, boys.
All right. Thank you, Howard. I'll talk to you very soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Plant Yourself podcast and you'd like to support our mission, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. And if you don't know how, go to plantyourself.com/review. And I put together a 1-minute video along with a link where you can go right to iTunes and leave that review. Like this 5-star review left by Jay Barshop on December 4th. And the headline is Awesome Show, Highly Recommend. Howard and his guests, Jay Barshop writes, provide some incredibly compelling content that's geared to help you take actionable steps to live a healthier, more well-rounded life. Highly recommend listening and subscribing to the Plant Yourself podcast if you want the knowledge and mindsets to improve your body, mind, and spirit and live your best life as a result. Thank you, Jay Barshop. And if you'd like more information about the Big Change Program led by me and Josh Lajani, visit bigchangeprogram.com. Looks like we'll have another run going in February, so we will be offering that in January. Keep a lookout in your email and on the podcast for details. And be sure to check out the show notes for today's episode with links to everything we talked about at plantyourself.com/244. If you're new to the show, you can catch up on 243 archived episodes over at plantyourself.com. If you get the podcast, but not the Big Change Bulldog, my weekly-ish newsletter, you can sign up and also get the sabotage report, the Stop Sabotage Report, the Stop Self-Sabotage Report at plantyourself.com/sabotage. In garden news, there's not really any garden news. This is one of those weeks when there's really nothing to do, so we're sitting indoors with different catalogs. I found a catalog that I absolutely fell in love with. It's called rareseeds.com. I've been leafing through it, trying not to salivate over the pages, and it turns out that the owners of the company actually have a vegan cookbook. So I started looking into them a little bit more, and maybe I'll see if I can reach out and have them as guests on the show, because the catalog is beautiful, and the mission of bringing back all these hundreds and hundreds of species, of varieties of plants that are delicious to eat and just aren't commercially viable to transport and grow in large quantities in monocultures. It's it's something that we should all be concerned about. In running news, I did a very satisfying 17 yesterday. It's really, really cold out. My fingers and toesies are complaining. And I've also started going to a men's workout group at 5:30 or 5:45 in the morning. The group is called F3 for Fitness, Fellowship, and Faith. It's really interesting. I'm learning a lot, not just about what it's like to get up at 5 in the morning and go work out before the sun comes up, but also the mechanisms of creating a movement. It's so if you go to F3, the number 3, F3nation.com, you can see what they're all about. I'm pretty picky, and I tend to be querulous and obstreperous, and I've really not found anything in this men's only group that really rubs me the wrong way, which is a very good sign. So I'll let you know how that goes. In the meantime, I'm doing my burpees and sherpies and crunches and push-ups on the cold asphalt very, very early in the mornings, in addition to all the running. All right, it's time for the thanks, starting with Will Ridenauer for allowing me to use Sabali Dawn, the Dance of Peace, as the theme music for this podcast. Check out willridenauer.com for more of his Cora music. And of course, thanks to all you Plant Yourself podcast patrons. I added 4 more, so we'll see if this is still a 2-breath thank or if I have to go into 3. Here we go. Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Anthony Disson, Brittany Porter, Dominic Mara, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Hatherley, Mary Jane Wheeler, Ellen Kennelly, Melissa Cobb, Rachel Behrens, Christine Nielsen, Tina Scharf, Tina Ahern, Jen Volkanovsky, David Bizek, Mysterious, Michelle X, Elizabeth Feldman, Victoria Dolomanova, Leah Stoller, Alan Christensen, Colleen Peck, Michelle Andrew, Josina, Julianne Rowland, Stu Dolnick, Sarah Durkis, Rhymes with Circus, Kelly Cameron, Wayne Pedersen, Leanne Peterson, Janet Selby, Claire Adams, Tom Franzek, Jeanette Benham, Gila Lasser, David Donahue, Blair Seibert, Dorona Vizo, Gio and Carolyn Argentati, Jody Friesner, Ruth Ann Funderburg, Misha Rosen, Michael Warbeck, the equally mysterious Tracy Z, Alicia Lemus, Rebecca Hughes, Val Linneman, Rhymes with Cinnamon, Nick Harper, Stephanie Holmes, Martha Bergner, Nicole Ramsey, Susan Allen, Molly Levine, the inscrutable Harry R., Susan Laverty, the Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Scharf, Karen Burry, Heather Morgan, Ashley Corker, and Kelly Machia, Deanne Norton, Bonnie Lynch, Plant Happy Oregon, Sabine Kurtzels, Nigel Davies, Marion Blum, Teresa Copelshell, Rutledge, Julian Watkins, Breed O'Connell, Brian Sheridan, Shannon Hirschman, Kate Rolls, Linda Ayat, Julie Langholm, Hedegard, Isa Tizinwa, Connie Hainline, Erin Greer, Alicia Davis, Aviva Lael, Heather O'Connor, Carolyn Jensen, Sherry Orlikowski of Plant Power for Health, and Karen Smith for your generous support of the podcast. That's it for this week. As always, be well, my friends.